If you have not watched part 1 of this series yet, go back and watch it first. The link is in the description. This will make a lot more sense if you start from the beginning. In 2016, NTK's first Tamil Nadu Assembly election, 1% vote share. In 2019, the national Lok Sabha election, 3.8%. In 2021, the Tamil Nadu Assembly election, 6.7%. Third largest party by vote share in the state. In 2024, the national Lok Sabha election, 8.1%, enough to earn official state party recognition. In 2026, Tamil Nadu Assembly election lost his own seat by over 70,000 votes, 0 seats won. Every single election, the numbers go up. Every single election, the seats stay at 0. This is the Seeman paradox. To understand why it has been this way, you have to understand what NTK actually is. It is not a party built on alliances or compromises. It is not a party built on welfare schemes or cash handouts. It is built entirely on one man's conviction that Tamil Nadu deserves better than what it has been given for the last 60 years. Seeman believes the Dravidian parties DMK and the AADMK have had their chance. 6 decades of alternating power, and the ordinary Tamil person is still waiting. NTK's answer to that is not a new welfare scheme. It is a completely different kind of politics. No alliances, no compromises, no caste calculations. Contest every seat, lose every seat if necessary. Keep growing. And it has been growing. 8% of Tamil Nadu's voters in 2024 chose a party that has never owned a single seat. That is not loyalty to a politician. That is belief in an idea. But beliefs have limits. And inside NTK, those limits begin to show. By late 2024, the party was bleeding. Over 400 members resigned from Krishnagiri district alone. More than 100 from Dharmapuri. Every week, another district, another resignation letter. The reason was consistent across all of them. They said Seeman ran NTK like a one-man operation. Decisions made at the top. No consultation, no space for dissent. Long-serving members sidelined. New members with money given roles over those who had built the party from nothing. One former district secretary resigned publicly and told the media many NTK cadres are upset and dissatisfied. They were excluded from key decisions. They were not given enough space to express their opinions. Seeman's response was unambiguous. Those who left are like weeds hindering the party's growth. Now that they have gone voluntarily, the party will expand significantly. Strong words from a leader watching hundreds of members walk out. NTK spokesperson defended the exits as normal party churn. Political analysts pointed out that NTK is not a cadre-based structure. It is built around Seeman himself. If he is the institution, the exits matter less. But the question it raises is real. A man who campaigns for the Tamil people's right to be heard, but accused by his own party members of not hearing them. Then came the alliance question. Before the 2026 election, there was serious speculation that NTK and TVK might find common ground. Both were outside the Dravidian mainstream. Both were growing. Both were anti-DMK. On paper, a natural fit. In reality, an impossible one. Seeman had spent years arguing that Tamil Nadu needed a politics completely free of Dravidian ideology. When Vijay announced that TVK would blend Dravidian ideology with Tamil nationalism, Seeman launched a direct attack. He questioned how both ideologies could exist on the same platform. He called it a contradiction. He said TVK was just another Dravidian party with a new face. When reporters asked Seeman about a potential alliance with the TVK, he made his position very clear without hesitation. He called Vijay his Thambi, his younger brother. He referred to himself as the Annan, the elder brother, keeping the personal warmth, drawing a firm political line. The message was unmistakable. If there was going to be an alliance, Vijay would need to come to him, not the other way around. Vijay never came. Seeman never asked. TVK ruled out any alliance with NTK entirely. Seeman announced NTK would contest alone. Two parties that could have been stronger together chose to fight separately. Both paid a price. TVK won 108 seats but fell short of a majority on its own. NTK won nothing. What if they had found a way to work together? Would Tamil Nadu's political story in 2026 look any different? Then there is the NIA. In 2023, the National Investigation Agency raided the homes and offices of multiple NTK leaders across Tamil Nadu. Investigators seized documents and books related to the LTTE, mobile phones, laptops, and memory devices. The case was linked to two men arrested in Salem in 2022 who were found carrying weapons and ammunition. The NIA said they had been inspired by the LTTE and wanted to establish a similar armed outfit in Tamil Nadu. NTK was not directly accused of involvement, but its leaders were questioned. Documents from its offices were taken. For a party already under pressure from cadre exits, this was another shadow cast over its credibility. Seeman denied any link to the case. His supporters called it political targeting. Critics asked a harder question. What is the line between celebrating the LTTE's ideology and inspiring those who want to replicate it? That question has no easy answer. And then there is a story that followed Seeman longer than any political controversy, the actress Vijayalakshmi case. In 2011, Vijayalakshmi filed a complaint at Virgambakam police station against Seeman. She alleged he had made false promises of marriage, used her sexually, and abandoned her. The case was booked under rape, cheating, and criminal intimidation. In 2012, she withdrew the complaint. The police kept the case open without closing it. In 2023, she filed again before a magistrate under Section 164 of the Criminal Procedure Code, a recorded statement that carries significant legal weight. She alleged rape on the pretext of marriage. She alleged he had forced her to undergo 7 abortions. Under Indian law, rape on a false promise of marriage is a recognized offense, but the Supreme Court has been clear on the standard. The fraudulent intent must have existed from the very beginning of the relationship. A promise that was genuine but later broken does not meet that standard. Whether Vijayalakshmi's allegations meet that legal threshold is a question that court has not yet fully answered. Tamil Nadu police summoned Seeman. He appeared before them and denied everything. He said there is not an iota of truth in these allegations. He said the timing close to elections was not a coincidence. Then, in September 2023, Vijayalakshmi withdrew the complaint again. She held a press conference. She said, I accept defeat. I am nothing in front of him. Nobody can do anything against him. She described being trolled and abused on social media after filing the complaint. An activist who supported her told the press, if people criticize a survivor instead of helping her, who would come forward to admit they were harassed? The case is not closed. But the Supreme Court granted Seeman an interim stay on the investigation in November 2025. The matter remains before the court. Two things are simultaneously true here and both need to be said. Vijayalakshmi made serious allegations on record before a magistrate. Seeman denied them completely on record. No conviction, no acquittal. A case that has been filed, withdrawn, refiled, and withdrawn again, stretching across more than 12 years. The court will decide. But for a man who has built his politics on the protection of the Tamil people, these allegations have asked a question that his politics alone cannot answer. And then there is a detail that most people overlook. In 2013, Seeman married Kailveli. She is the daughter of Kalimuthu, a seasoned AIDMK politician. The man who has spent 16 years telling Tamil Nadu that the Dravidian parties have failed its people married into the family of one of its senior leaders. His supporters say personal and political lives are separate. His critics say the contradiction speaks for itself. This is who Seeman is. A man with a growing vote share and 0 seats. A party built on Tamil purity raided by the NIA. A leader who speaks for the voiceless accused by his own cadres of not hearing them. A man who champions Tamil dignity facing allegations he has never fully answered. And a marriage into the very establishment he has spent his career opposing. Every one of these contradictions is real. Every one of them is documented. And yet, 8% of Tamil Nadu voted for him in 2024. That is the Seeman paradox. It does not resolve neatly because Tamil Nadu politics never does. In the next part of this series, the allegations, the audio leaks, and the burning question everyone needs an answer for. Why has Tamil Nadu's most vocal politician never owned a single seat? I'll see you in the next video.